Stephen Hurahan here at BrandMasterAcademy.com, and in this video I'm talking brand promise and what are the 5 key principles you need to know before you go into the market and start making promises on behalf of your brand. Now, before we jump into the nuts and bolts on this one, I just want to clear up some of the fog that you probably have around this term. Now, you probably know this already, and I speak quite a lot about it, but there are a lot of branding terms out there that get completely misrepresented online, and brand promise is probably the one that gets dragged through the dirt the most. It's probably the most misrepresented term that I've seen online, and just in the research that I've done for the content that I'm producing at the moment, I've read an article that displayed 8 or 10 cases of the best examples they'd seen of brand promise, which included Nike, Just Do It, and McDonald's, I'm Loving It. Now, I don't know about you, but a promise to me is something a little bit different than that. If I was to say to you, I want to make you a promise, and you said, okay, what's your promise? And I said to you, just do it. You'd say to me, Stephen, that's not a promise. And you'd be right, because it's not a promise. And there are a lot of articles, there are a lot of stories and terms out there that get completely misrepresented, so I just want to clear that up. So I want to lay down 5 key principles of brand promise so you know for yourself what a brand promise is going forward when you see it in other brands, and how to develop your own brand promise for your own brand or for your clients' brands. Key principle number 1, your promise is an extension of your position. Now, I've got a few videos on brand positioning and brand positioning strategy, so if you haven't seen them, go check them out. But your position, in effect, is the idea that you have, that you want to plant in the mind of your audience. And through the positioning strategy, you define the difference that you're going to make to your audience, to their lives, when compared to the competitors in the marketplace. What are the competitors doing, and what are you doing differently? What's your differentiator, and what's the idea around that? Your brand promise then is an extension of that position. It's an extension of that difference that you're going to make in their lives, but it represents the experience that your audience can expect through obtaining that difference. And it also includes the rest of your overall brand and the rest of your brand interaction, your brand strategy, including your internal brands such as your purpose, your mission, your vision, and your values. All of these elements are represented within the brand promise in the overall experience that your audience can expect from your brand. Key principle number 2, your brand promise is not your positioning statement. Now, the big difference between your positioning statement and your brand promise is in who this is meant for. Your positioning statement is internal first. It's meant to be a guide for the internal brand, to guide the leadership team and guide the brand builders in developing the rest of the brand and developing the overall strategy of the brand and the communication strategy, whereas your brand promise is customer facing. So your brand promise is meant to deliver a promise. It's meant to communicate to your audience what it is that they're going to get through your brand, the overall experience that they're going to get. So that's the main difference between the two. I know that a lot of people go out into the marketplace and communicate their brand positioning statement, and that's not what the positioning statement is for. It's not developed as a customer-facing document, and it's really not shaped for that. It's not refined for a customer-facing piece of material. It is broken up into a number of different elements, and they're meant to guide the overall brand in terms of its direction, in terms of how they want to communicate the difference that they offer, whereas the promise then communicates the customer facing side, the overall experience. So they're the main difference there between the two. Your brand promise is not your brand positioning statement. Your brand positioning statement is internal first. Your brand promise is customer facing. Key principle number 3, your brand promise is not a tagline. Now, this one is rife out there online, and I've seen so many articles that give examples of the best brand promises, and they just have a list of taglines. Your brand promise is not a tagline, and the main difference between the two of them is that your tagline is developed for one goal and for one goal only, and that's to plant a seed in the mind of your audience as to why your brand should be remembered And the reason that they should remember your brand is based on the difference that you offer in the marketplace. And the tagline should be as concise as possible, between 4 to 5 words. If it's catchy, it's going to be more memorable, and it just makes it easier for your audience to recall your brand. And that's its job, to plant a seed in the audience, in your audience's mind, so they can easily recall your brand. Your brand promise, on the other hand, is a promise of that overall experience, and it's not designed for your audience to just recall it instantly. Theoretically, or preferably, you will have both a tagline and a promise, and you will plant that seed in the mind of your audience with the tagline so they can easily recall your brand. When they do, they'll remember your promise, and they'll remember that overall experience that they can expect from your brand. So that's the difference between your tagline and your promise. Key principle number 4, your promise can be literal or implied. So that means you actually don't have to make a literal promise. You don't have to go out into the marketplace and say, we promise that we're going to do this. You can have a promise, or you will have a promise through your brand, through an implied message. So the message that you deliver to the market, the communication strategy that you have, will go about communicating the difference that you offer in the marketplace, will go about communicating the position that you offer, and it might even communicate the internal brand as well. And all of these elements, all of these pieces of communication are statements that you make to the market and to your audience. And in making those statements, you are making promises. The fact is that 90% of brands don't actually go out and articulate a promise. They don't communicate to the market what their promise is, but through their communication, through their social posts, their blog posts, their advertisements, whatever form of communication their audience receives, they do make an implied promise in the features or the benefits or the experience that their audience is going to receive. That is an implied promise. If your audience believes that you are committing to something through your communication, you are making a promise to them. And like any other promise, you must actually keep that promise. So that's the difference there. Not all brands communicate or articulate a promise. In fact, 90% of brands don't, but all brands must keep the promises that they make through their implied communication. Key principle number 5, bold promises solidify positions. Now, when you go through your positioning strategy and you define the difference that you're going to make in the market to your audience, then that difference will eventually become a promise, whether it's implied or literal. But brands that go out into the marketplace and make bold promises and they state the difference that they're going to make in the market as a promise, they earn more trust from their audience. And the reason for that is that there is an air of confidence around a bold promise. If you make a bold promise in the market, then your audience sees that. They know that your reputation is on the line in making that promise. And because you're prepared to put your reputation on the line, there's a lot more trust lent to your brand because of that promise. A good example of this is the Dollar Shave Club. Their promise and their tagline is shave time, shave money. And they go out into the marketplace and they boldly state what their promise is, that their audience is going to save time and they're going to save money. And that confidence, that air of confidence and that bold statement lends more trust from the consumer. So if you are going to define a differentiation strategy, which you should do through your position, then it's going to be an applied promise, whether you go out and communicate it into the marketplace or not. You should have confidence around the difference that you're going to offer within the market. And if you're able to back that up with a bold statement or a bold promise, then that can really solidify your position in the market for your audience. So in summary, your brand promise is not a brand positioning statement and it's not a tagline. It is a commitment to your customer, whether literal or implied, about the overall experience that they are going to receive from your brand. So whether you go out into the marketplace and make an actual promise or not, your audience will believe that you have made a commitment to them, and you should keep that again and again and again. If you are really confident about the difference that you want to offer in the marketplace, well then think about making or developing a literal promise that can help you solidify that position in the mind of your audience. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe. If you've got any questions around brand promise, stick them in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them, and I will see you in the next video.